We now move on to our next session for the day, a panel discussion on the topic, Reimagining Operating Models for the Hybrid Era. Now, businesses continue to re-examine how they will operate in the new unchartered territory. With new working models like coming into existence, organizations need to think about how they would drive agile innovation without lowering productivity, match the rising customer expectations, and think of the effect all these will have on various business processes. Our speakers for this session are Nancy Gioia, board member, Lucid Group, Meggitt PLC, and Brady Corp. Nancy is a highly experienced executive and independent board member with strong strategy and planning, product development, technology, and manufacturing background. We also have with us Shamik Mishra, Vice President, CTO Connectivity, Capgemini Engineering. He has nearly 20 years of experience in the industry. As CTO Connectivity, Shamik drives technology solutions, architecture, research, and innovation in areas like 5G networking, virtualization, cloud-native edge computing, artificial intelligence, and carrier cloud platforms. We also have with us this evening Pankaj, Vyas, CEO and Managing Director, Siemens Technology and Services Private Limited. Pankaj is a seasoned technology business leader with over 25 years of industry experience in leading innovation, engineering, product management, and business development. Moderating the session is Anupam Trehan, Senior Director, APJC, People and Communities HR Cisco Systems. As a senior HR leader, Anupam's focus is to work with senior leaders and their teams to build integrated talent and people strategies. During her tenure of over a decade with Cisco, Anupam has worked across different roles, including people and communities, head of India and SAARC, HR leader for the engineering India organization, customer experience, Asia Pacific, Japan, and Greater China. It's a pleasure to have you all join us this afternoon. Over to you, Anupam.
Thank you, Justin, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining our session today on reimagining operating models for the hybrid era. The future of work is here. And how? In the last few months, we have seen major transitions, work-related as well as workspace-related. It's not just about physical barriers of the workspace that is shifting and changing and evolving, but with automation, digitization, competition stepping in, we are seeing organizations across different industries really reimagine and rethink new models of working, whether that's hybrid ways of working, or whether that's even rethinking how do we take work to the right teams and talent, be it co-partnering, be it gig, be it co-development. We're seeing a lot of shifts in this new world of work. I have the absolute fortune to speak to an esteemed panel on this topic today. So without further ado, let's just dive straight right in. So Pankaj, Shamik, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to start with you all with this first question. What does hybrid mean for your organizations, and how are you all thinking about this transition to hybrid? Pankaj, if we could start with you, please.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Anupam, for having me here. Absolutely honored to share the panel with other fellow members over here. I mean, this has been pretty interesting times, to say the least. 2 years back, we all had our learnings how to stay at home and continue to deliver what we are supposed to deliver on. And we have had tremendous learnings on that, right from just keeping each other safe to getting things done, working together and whatnot, right? Now, as things are getting a little bit better and calmer, and hopefully it stays positive going forward, I think we are going to have new sets of learning getting back to newer world over here. Just the way we had a lot of learnings getting into working from home, I think we all are going to get into a new phase of learning. And then there are new terminologies like hybrid working from home, remote working, or you can keep coining that. So talking from the perspective that I see, at Siemens and in general, talking to our customers, right? Definitely, we are not going back to the world that we left 2 years back. It has changed for sure. It is a new world. I mean, it's not even new anymore. After a year, that's going to be a normal. People coming back to their designated cubicles, I think that's gone. For most of us, that's gone. Okay. We all will have to learn to say, hey, look, I'm going to go to office, book my place, find a place to work. And office is going to be more of a professional collaborating place rather than just going to place and do something. Because we know we can get done a lot of things from where people are, at home. So what the offices would be really used for is socializing, having connect, collaborative discussions, a whole lot of whiteboarding that definitely has been missing. I mean, all said and done, there's so much that digitalization can do, but I think office spaces would be used for that. So from where I'm seeing, hybrid is going to be more about people finding reasons, real reasons to be in office, to collaborate, to discuss, take the ideas further, and not to be there to do the work that they can anyways do from their home. I think that's going to be a hybrid model going forward. And just the way we have been driving innovation and all, I'm sure we'll talk about that later in the discussion. But to me, that's a hybrid model over here. Offices are not just about doing the work that you can do at home, but a lot more about in-person collaboration.
Thanks, Pankaj. Shamik, I'm coming to you next.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anupam, here. And as Pankaj mentioned, I think you covered a really good aspect about what do we really do when we are back in office, right? I mean, to a certain extent, we used to have a life before 2020. Now we have a very different way of working. And when we are back in office, we definitely have to find the right mix of what we used to do earlier and what we want to do in the future. Having said that, the setup of an organization is quite important on how a hybrid model can actually take way. And if you look at some of the key aspects that we actually had looked at, is that our most important priority, of course, was to remain client-centric. And that perhaps can happen from anywhere. The role of innovation, which Pankaj alluded to, can of course be discussed later today. But the major change that we did in the last 1.5 years was empowerment, making decisions a little more decentralized, creating more global labs, creating teams that are global teams, not really focusing on a single team in a single location. Also, that meant that we had to go through a completely different cycle of learning. Learning not just how to work, but in this kind of an environment, but also learning new tools, learning new collaboration methods. And will we all junk that and all that learning that we had in the past 1.5 years, are we going to junk all of that when we are back in office? I don't think that's going to happen. So there is an irreversible learning that has happened in the way of working. There is an irreversible amount of investments that has happened in automation, in the learning tools, in collaboration tools, and that's not going to change for sure. So we'll have to find a way on how these two worlds merge. And in a certain way, I think that is going to be more exciting because we'll find even more newer ways of collaborating in the future.
Thanks, Shamik. Nancy, coming to you next.
Yeah, I'm in a slightly different position with a different view on 3 public companies at this time. 1 based in the UK, 2 in the United States, different industries, industrials, aerospace, and automotive. So what's been interesting to me is the model or how work is being done, moving from a time where you were forced to be remote, to be able to continue to do work, to where now, some areas are moving towards a hybrid model. One of the companies I work with came back very strong and very quickly to everybody must be in the office as quickly as possible. And, I think there's a few things to think about, in the world going forward, the term tools was used and definitely tools and changes in tools, acceleration of digital in all aspects of our business, whether it's the tools and how we do work, whether it's the back-end systems and how work is done and you interface around the world, whether it's the manufacturing processes, whether it's your data and analytics. There's a huge amount of digital that has just accelerated in the last couple of years. But that's not the only thing a lot of companies do. They also, wherever there is software, whether there is a counterpart of hardware in manufacturing. And I think one of the things that I would say is the models are not the same. It's not going to be ubiquitous for all. Even those who are in the software industry, in software, if it's software that drives product, software that drives manufacturing processes, you still have to be where those products are being envisioned, designed, developed, piloted, tried. If you're in the manufacturing, you have to be there on the floor helping to solve real-time problems to keep that line running. And so, yes, many new tools, I think there's going to be a fluidity between employees and the employer relation. And it's a real challenge because some employees must be at work, must be in the traditional manufacturing line, must be in the traditional cubicles, because that is where either their customer expects them, they have to be there for the innovation, for working together, for solving problems. So the work location and hours is going to become flexible, yet, wow, what a stress on our employee base. You know, when everybody was at home, and the manufacturing floor stopped for a while. Well, then people started coming back, but the hours have extended for our people. So I think the new world in, you know, employees at all levels, leadership, the top level of leadership all the way down to your floor leaders running processes and things. There's a new level of stress and a new level of empathy that's going to be required to really understand and remain connected with employees. And I think that's going to be, you know, a big question is not only what does the new environment look like, but what do our employees and for all of us and others, that includes us, what do we expect? You know, culture is going to become more important in the workplace, recognition, how we recognize, how the immediate supervisor or peers, how you recognize each other, development and growth, that's still a desire of employees. What does development and growth look like in the future? And then the positive reputation, working on things that matter, that make a difference, because the next generation clearly is very, very focused on this. So, you know, no simple answer as to what it looks like. I think it will be very different by industry. It is going to be different by type of work that you do. Yet all of these critical factors of what people need, the culture, the recognition, development opportunities, growth, positive reputation, that says leadership has to change as well as people. And all of the how we do things. So I think we're just at the cusp. I don't think we have a new model in mind. I think it's, you know, it's the wild, wild west, as they say in the United States, which is not always good. It's huge stress. And so mental health and other things are going to become on the fore. And I can say as a board member, mental health has become an agenda item of the organization. And I started joining boards in 2012 and 2013, and it was never on the agenda as a major element to consider with respect to talent development and how the organization is moving. So that's just one more example of new topics that have to be considered that we didn't think about before.
Thanks for that, Nancy. I'm with you. I think the future is unknown, and I think it's a wee bit messy as well, as all of us are navigating and trying to find our place with respect to what's going to work best. And I think you're again absolutely right with this piece around flexibility, but empathy becoming such an important currency in this new world of working as well. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and then I'm going to probably come back into this whole impact on people and talent, because I think that's a really important one for us to have. But one of the core things for most organizations as well is just the business, right? So how do you continue to invest in your business? How do you continue to grow? How do you continue to deliver on your customer expectations and experience, right? And to be able to do that, there's this whole piece around innovation, there's this piece around productivity, there's also this element around talent which comes in. Would just to love to get your thoughts around, as businesses are thinking about these new ways of working, how do we start to think about driving impact for our customers? How do we start to think about things like productivity and employee impact? Like just a few examples. And Nancy, maybe we'll start with you and go back to the others.
Yeah, you know, interesting also, you know, as a board member, one of the things we obviously look at is the organization, does it have a compelling vision, comprehensive strategy? Are we relentless on our implementation? And how do we know? Right? So you have to measure things. And productivity, wow. if you can count the number of parts and things you do in an hour, that's a pretty clear measure of productivity. When you start to look at lines of code and interface or new innovation, new concepts, ideas, how you measure productivity gets pretty fuzzy. So it's not as black and white as, for all roles. And what's been interesting to me is I've talked to people in various organizations, traditional measures of productivity, when you're working many more hours or different elements, it's not necessarily applicable. So how, I think one of the things that's really important is we still have to be fact and data driven. If you are a proponent from work from home, you can create facts that and a part of the story that says you're more productive or less productive, depending on which side of the coin you're on. So I think it's going to be really important for leadership and everybody in the organization to step back and say, are our measures really giving us the story, the clear story? Is it building a complete story, or is it only from one lens? Because you can get very different answers from that. And I think re-examining that, stepping back, looking for biases that may exist in how we measure, what we look at, what we do, those will become challenges. So, I think the one thing that this has opened up is it absolutely is tremendous permission to step back and say, is what we are measuring still correct? Have we put in unintentional biases that are leading us one way or another? And is our strategy and approach still going to work as now we have a different view of the world? And I think those are, by the way, that's a lot of heavy lifting. That says anything that you used to come in and sit in and say, I can count on this. No, you have to re-examine it. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be. But that's going to be the place I think we are for the next probably several years. And that's going to be a new competency that people hire for, the ability to step back, reflect, and be open to really different ideas. That's going to be a new, I think, senior leader and leadership skill all the way out. And we're going to have to develop people.
Shamik, could I come to you next?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the most important aspects is how do we define productivity? I mean, if you look at the years gone by, we have defined productivity, as Nancy mentioned, whether it's in terms of lines of code or what we really produce as parts. However, I think we have to go beyond that to manage productivity in order to measure productivity. One of the ideal ways of doing that perhaps is to look at the end objective of, are we able to meet our customer satisfaction? Are we able to meet our commitments and deliveries? And for that, if certain things needs to be changed, so be it. And now it's not easy. It's easy perhaps to say this today, but it's not easy to implement that. And we had to go through a lot of cycles around it in practice. For example, we had to set our own priorities. I mean, what are our priorities when it comes to people, in terms of processes, in terms of how we measure things, how we react to something which might suddenly be an outlier, how we used to react earlier to a failed KPI, and how do we react to a failed KPI today is completely different, perhaps. And at the same time, we are also looking at how do we use our time properly. For example, as Nancy mentioned, there's a lot of work that we are doing. The work time has extended. We are not perhaps in the initial stages of this hybrid model, or even in the work from home model, we were not communicating that much. So how do we over communicate? These were some of the key aspects when we have to manage productivity. Now, apart from that, it's a very important aspect is leadership. That's what we realize today completely. We need people to work very, very differently and keep the leaders have to keep people at the center of what they do. what their policies, the way of working, how they interact with clients, how they draw certain boundaries, how they even negotiate a contract has to be kept in mind that the workplace is different now. The days of one-way communication is long gone. How do we listen to our customers? We have to equally listen a lot to our people. We have to keep people informed and ensure that there is easy access to information. Information about how they can do their work better, in a more productive manner, in a healthy manner, and they are able to eliminate information overload, and we are able to create more cross-functional collaboration. So these are some of the key challenges that we had to solve, and that's, I'm not talking of anything new. We actually been doing that for a while now, but this got more prominent during the last couple of years, just because keeping the employees productive and at the same time keeping the mental health balanced, and at the same time ensuring that the client satisfaction is maintained, it's a complex problem. There are too many variables, and unless we take some hit somewhere, all of this won't work together.
Pankaj, if I could come to you next.
Sure, I mean, going back to the point that Nancy talked about, for a lot of the industries, specifically in manufacturing, guys will come back to the flow. There's no other way that for people to produce these things. I mean, this certain level of automation that's going to happen, and digitalization will continue. So there you can measure productivity pretty straightforward, number of units produced per day. But I think the challenge that the manufacturing guys will have, how do I sustain this productivity, looking at fluctuation in demand and supply, and especially this changing supply chain constraints. As we know today already, the ICs and chipsets and SoCs and whatnot. So today is one thing is I have a productivity today, but what do I need to do from leadership perspective so I can sustain it for foreseeable future and my customers don't keep waiting for the products. So that's on manufacturing side. If you come to the software side, right, or the technology side of it, you would say, I want to measure productivity based on number of releases I've made, number of products I have released. That's one. But then second is, what was the quality of those products that got released during that time, right? Were they tested enough? Have they really gone through the rigorous testing that they have gone through? So that's a quality element along with that productivity attached. Now comes the same element like for manufacturing, how do I sustain productivity? Even for the people who are working from home, how do you sustain productivity? Because there's an element of burnout there. High productivity numbers and high product release numbers are basically hiding the burnout beneath there. The mental wellness issues that Nancy referred to, those are being hidden beneath these high productivity numbers that we talk about. So for us to say, one thing is to have a productivity today, but how do I sustain this productivity going forward? I think leadership really needs to start thinking proactively on those elements. Now, coming to innovation also, a lot of innovations happened as necessity because you had to automate things. There was no other way to get things going in last 2 years. So we have really have two kinds of businesses here who are sitting on the ring fence for digitalization, but who had no other option but to jump into it now. One set of businesses who are waiting for technologies to mature and say that, are these the right technologies for my business? Second sets of business owners where, is this real, or are these like technology guys trying to sell me some technology for the sake of it? And both of them have got convinced now that there's no other way, I have to take technology. So in last 2 years, we have seen a lot of innovation out of necessity. But the question will again come, now are we hitting the points where the innovation may not continue at the same level, or you may not be able to accelerate if you don't do some things differently? Because that's another element. You have to sustain the innovation and accelerate further. So those are the elements clearly from productivity and innovation. Now, if you talk about leadership, in general, my view is that leadership is really about, you have to enable, you have to empower, and then you have to energize your people to get things done. Those are like 3 E's that you would talk about. But clearly 2 more things which have come up in last 2 years. One is empathy and second is trust. So you might have enabled your people with right tools, technology, know-how. You may have empowered them to take the decisions. You may have energized them with all the visions. But if you're not able to empathize what they are going through, it's going to be very difficult for them to be productive for a long run. if you're not going to be trusting them as to what they're going through and what they're asking for is a real need, you're not going to have a high productivity for a long time to come. You might have a little bit of a spikes, but you will start seeing the burnout. So I think this is how the overall productivity innovation will have to be looked at going forward, in my view.
Thanks, Pankaj. And for my next question, because all three of you all spoke about leadership, right? And I want to kind of peel the onion on leadership a little bit, because I think it's so, so important in this new world of ours, right? Because when you start to think about leadership, it's not just with respect to setting the business direction or and guiding the culture in which the business needs to be done, but like we also spoke, it's about the leadership that our employees are going to be experiencing day in and day out, right? Whether that's flexibility, whether that is empathy, whether that is trust, whether there's fairness. I think there are so many different aspects of leadership that are going to start to show up. So Shamik, maybe I'm going to come to you and have you kick us off for this one, but how do you see that evolving, and what do you think organizations need to start to think about doing differently, especially when it comes to people leadership? Because it's obviously shifting and evolving and changing. What do organizations need to start to think about people leadership given this change and evolution that we are in?
Very good question, Anupam. I think the key of the success of a hybrid model, or even in the world that we live in, is how the leaders react to this situation. And more often than not, that's easier said than done. A whole group of leaders have grown up in an environment which is completely different to what we are today. And it's also, we have to understand that even for leadership, this is a learning process. Like everybody else, they're also trying to get a hang of the situation and trying to figure out what works best. And definitely, if they try 10 things, 5 things may work, 5 may not. So first of all, the leaders should be open to, to be open enough to realize that some of their initiatives won't work. And that's very important because there has to be a feedback cycle that you try something out, it didn't work, you go back to the drawing board, try something out again, and that cycle has to be rapid. You cannot wait for a process to show maturity for a year, because you simply don't have the time to do that. People will burn out prior to that. So first of all, I think the openness about in the leadership itself, that this is a new area, they are also learning. This is not something they have come fully experienced. So they have to, first of all, realize that and be open to change. The second, and perhaps the most important thing, as I mentioned earlier, is about listening actively. And the bidirectional communication is extremely important because unless the leaders talk to people and figure out whether their acts, their ideas, their processes, their policies are working, how do they know what to change? So, and at the same time, we are not meeting physically more often. So there aren't any town halls that way. So how do the process of collecting information is also quite important. So the leaders shouldn't get fixated by what they are getting as a feedback from their immediate reports and not really from the larger team. I mean, at times that can be a sort of a information paradox that they might get into. So that's an area to avoid. The other aspects which I think is that I cannot emphasize more on tools and processes, or the tools, in fact, because tools are important. Tools are making our lives simpler, but at the same time, the tools are also evolving. Sticking to one tool and that particular tool is going to solve all my problems is not a great approach. So so an organization will have to set up not just, lack of a better word, not just a digital office, but they need to set up a workplace transformation office, which has to entirely focus on how a workplace is to be transformed. Their job has to be specific on how people are being looked after, how they are being empowered, whether decision-making is decentralized, whether the overheads are removed, and whether this is a continuous process and not just one set of static implementations. So these are some of the key aspects, I think, but I'm really interested to know more from others.
Thanks, Shamik. Pankaj, could I come to you next?
Sure. I mean, I think Shamik really covered quite a lot of topics pertinent to the situation that we are in, especially from the people leadership perspective. A very interesting thing. People those who have joined in last 2 years, the new employees in the organizations, correct? most of these guys, most of this, pretty much, I can even say all, but just to be safe, most of it, I would say, have not even met their colleagues. They have not met their managers in person, okay? And a lot of these guys are very young fellows, and they really want to know whom am I working for, what am I supposed to be doing, what's my purpose is, where do I fit into big picture, and all of that. So clearly, when I see from leadership perspective, the number one thing is how do you bring, when you're bringing new people on board, right? How do you make them feel part of this organization? How do you build that sense of belonging to start with? That's one. Second, even for the people who have been around for long, they are used to certain way of working. They are used to certain way of connecting with the leadership team. And now that's changing, as Shamik said. We have to have town halls, we have to connect more often. So clearly there needs to be like, maybe 10x more effort on building that emotional bond. I think leadership has to be a lot more emotionally invested today in its employees than ever before. Other than that, without that, you're not going to create the bond that you need. It's just not possible. Otherwise, that glue is weakening. All that I do is I speak to laptop throughout the day. And to me, where do I work? Whom do I work for? Where do I belong? Those are real questions. So today, I think leadership is a lot more than, of course, outcome orientation, result orientation, and all of that. But I don't think listening and getting emotionally invested, getting emotionally connected was as important as we have today. Without that, employees are just not going to feel part of the organization that they are. That's one part. Second, in these times, I know pretty much all the organizations run their learning and development programs, and most of this have been in person. But all of that has to now move to digital and virtual, but still not miss the essence and the impact. So that's another challenge that we have to work on. Just having a training digital is one element, but is it really delivering what it should do? Is it really being consumed in a way that it should be? Otherwise, you will start seeing your competency graph going down because you think you're done with the training hours, let's say 20, 50, 100 digital hours training, but we don't know what really came out of it. How much was it consumed? So I think that's another element of, I think one is the emotionally investing in employees. Second is making sure that you're not losing on building the competencies by just counting number of hours people are attending the training. I think those are two major elements I see when I see the looking forward next couple of years from here on. Yeah.
Pankaj. Nancy, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, I just can't agree more with the points that have been made. I think what I'm hearing overwhelmingly, and maybe it came up a little bit ago from Shamik, is people first. Our people have to be the center of everything in this new environment. And empathy, listening, continuous learning, all of these things, leaders at all levels have to rethink. It is just so difficult. I don't know how many Zoom meetings or things you guys have been in this last year. At some point, you're just like tired. Hey, I don't even want to look at myself anymore. I think, that's how do you maintain the energy and enthusiasm to really connect with everybody on your team, to make them feel a part of the organization, to make that unit feel where some have never met each other physically, as you say. So I think the leadership challenges going forward, and this is not just the C-suite or the senior leaders, this is at every level. This is even down, it doesn't matter where you are in the organization, everybody leads a part of their work. This is a challenge. It's a challenge for respect, recognition, empathy, clarity of goals, clarity of measures, opportunities to develop. I think early on we talked maybe a bit about relevancy. Employees, how do I know I'm still relevant? How do I know I'm still recognized for what I'm doing, that I'm working on things that make a difference, that, all of that has been really elevated to an all new level. And so as leaders, if our employees, our suppliers, our customers who are also going through these changes are experiencing the same thing, it would be ridiculous to say leaders don't have to change, right? So we do. The challenge is there's no clear roadmap. And the other thing I'll say is regionally around the world, in different areas, different countries, because COVID is still quite variable around the world, and we're still having disruptions because of COVID, or because COVID has now resulted in severe supply chain disruption, or geopolitical issues are exacerbating that. Oh, inflation is going to drive supply chain changes because that's going on around the world, you know, the profitability of business, you know. So there's all these things that are driving disruption. How much should leaders, senior leadership, allow local control versus, you know, the mothership controlling from the home base, right? And I think what you know, how you create a network and structure where local decisions based on the conditions there, you know, individual leaders are going to have to be given more control to try things. But then you want to get communication and feedback. Did it work? Did it not work? Why didn't it work or not work? Was it because of the culture in that area, or is it a bigger, broader issue, right? I mean, so I think all of this says that tools that allow folks to communicate and assess the things that are working and not working, those don't exist today, and they're going to have to be evolving on the how we get work done. We've done a lot of work digitally on tools, bots to, you know, do repetitive tasks and all sorts of things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a deeper continuous learning algorithms that help us understand what works, what doesn't work, and why, and that people can trust it to start to make learnings from that. So there's no question leaders are going to be changing, and the factors of disruption are just going to be continuing. So development and recruiting, what are the key skills that you want to develop, and what are the key skills you're going to recruit for in the future? That is evolving also. So this is touching every aspect of the business.
Thanks, Nancy. I have to admit, I have a lot more questions that I want to ask you and get your insights on, but our time today is up, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Pankaj, Shamik, Nancy, for joining us today and sharing your insights. It seems like we've just spent actually 35 minutes together, but we've touched across a variety of topics. So thank you for your openness. Thank you for just sharing your thoughts with us. I'm sure our audience absolutely appreciates it. Thank you so much once again. And Justin, back to you.
Thank you, Anupam, and our speakers, Nancy, Shamik, and Pankaj, for that brilliant discussion on the topic, reimagining operating models for the hybrid era.